Let me ask you something and just notice what happens inside as you actually listen. Think about the last time your hand reached for your phone without any real reason. Maybe you were thinking about something, or maybe you were between tasks, or maybe you felt a tiny pause and just automatically filled it with looking at your phone. That moment felt like nothing, it was just routine, almost, really not that a big of a deal, right? But moments like that literally shape how your brain works under pressure. And this is exactly what we'll be talking about today. Welcome to the Neuroleadership Edge. I'm Claire Hayek. I'm a neuroleadership expert, TEDx speaker, founder of Mind, Soul, Purpose Team Building, and my work focuses on one thing: pressure breaks leadership and team performance, and I design the systems that actually prevent it. This show is about what actually happens in your brain when the stakes are high and how to stay clear, grounded, and effective when it matters most. Today, we're talking about attention, how everyday scrolling actually trains your brain to operate in a chaotic, scattered way. And we're going to cover why that scattered state makes decision feel more difficult over time, and how to protect your mental bandwidth while staying fully engaged with the world around you. I want to start with something I hear constantly from leaders. They tell me they spend the entire day moving, responding, deciding, and managing. The calendar is pretty much full. The inbox keeps moving, everything's changing, it's overloaded. And still, by the end of the day, something feels unfinished. They're answering their emails, they're doing their tasks, but it still feels like they didn't really accomplish much. So the energy, they feel like their energy is not high enough. Their focus is a bit spread out. Decisions are a bit more difficult than they used to. And what they describe to me isn't mental overload, really. It's just that their brain is fragmented. So fragmentation trains the brain in very specific ways. Every time you scroll, you switch tabs, check a message, or jump between tasks, your brain learns a pattern. It learns how to stay alert without really settling. It learns how to scan instead of land and focus. It also learns that, the its attention staying slightly activated. It's not landing on one thing. It's always watching, it's always half engaged. Pretty much that state feels familiar to, in my opinion, way too many people. Nothing seems urgent, but nothing is complete. Even simple choices begin to carry really a heavy weight. This experience grows from adaptation. The brain adapts beautifully to what it practices. So when attention keeps shifting, the brain spends energy staying oriented. That leaves less capacity for judgment, for intuition, and follow through. So that's why people say things like, I stayed busy all day, yet I feel really scattered, or my decisions are not very clear. They kind of feel fuzzy. Or I really want to stay clear-headed and focused, but it seems really out of reach. It feels really hard. Those experiences actually make total sense. Actually, research on attention and cognitive load shows that the brain works best when it completes cognitive cycles. What does that mean? When you're completing a task, it actually restores clarity. It restores energy. When cycles stay open, mental energy leaks. Like, think of it as a pathway is open, so the energy is leaking out. But when you close the loop, you're containing that energy. So scrolling actually trains the brain to expect something new, novelty. before it resolves anything. So switching tasks trains the brain to stay in evaluation mode. Oh, I'm constantly evaluating here. Over time, attention becomes very wide but shallow. There's no depth into the attention. You see everything, but depth is kind of like a rare thing. Direction feels harder to access. That focused flow seems really hard or out of reach, really. So there's another layer here that actually matters. Really, it's really important when we're under pressure. When attention stays, right, we talked about fragmentation. So when that attention stays fragmented, the nervous system stays lightly activated all day. I always bring it back to the nervous system because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to slow down, regulate, focus, ground, anchor. So we're in our prefrontal cortex and we could operate well under pressure. So when the attention is fragmented in a gazillion things, the nervous system stays lightly just activated all day. So that state keeps the brain alert, which is normal, right? You are multitasking, you're doing a lot of things, so your brain is constantly alert. And so what that does is that your muscles, they're holding this subtle tension because you're staying alert, right? And so recovery, feeling anchored with our nervous system down, with our nervous system kind of focused and slowing down, it's not quick. It takes longer to feel that recovery. Neuroscience actual research on stress regulation and the prefrontal cortex shows that the sustained activation increases mental fatigue. This really matters. So fatigue shows, how do we define fatigue, or how is it showing up? Here's some examples for you. Fatigue can show up as impatience, decision friction, you're reacting emotionally, and it also can show up as reduced tolerance for things that are not clear, things that are ambiguous. So leadership feels really heavy in that state. Nothing is settling. Everything is just alert at all times. So when we want that clarity to return, when we want calm authority, when we want to regulate our nervous system, we need to regulate, we need to focus our attention. Leaders that actually can regain that sharp flow, that sharp focus, they spend less time on consuming information and scattering and more on protecting their attention. They close the loops. Remember those little draining open loops that drain our energy. They close the loop. They finish mental cycles. They allow moments where attention just fully is taking its space and it's fully landing. They're anchored. There's a habit that quietly amplifies fragmentation. Many people pair scrolling with mental processing. They feel like, they're scrolling, they're going between tasks, we're being sharp, we're being really on the ball, we're getting things done, we're being productive. So they just scroll automatically and jump from one thing to the other while maybe being, thinking of a past conversation, replaying a conversation, basically, or they are scrolling or switching tabs while thinking about a certain decision that they need to make. They are like halfway. They're not fully focused on that decision they're making because they're multitasking. They are, again, switching back and forth or scrolling while maybe feeling frustrated or carrying frustration from a conversation that they just had. So the brain links reflection with distraction. You see how that works? So it's like, as I multitask, I'm making decisions. As I multitask, I'm reflecting. As I multitask, I'm making decisions. So the brain is saying, okay, so when I'm distracted, this is when I reflect. So there's no depth. depth is longer there. It's uncomfortable for the brain. It's like, wow, going deeper on things and fully taking the time, it doesn't feel right. Staying still and working on one task feels kind of just unfamiliar. It's this uncomfortable thing. And this is where clarity just goes away, because we just keep doing that. And now we're just completely not in our focus. So the brain becomes really good at what it practices, right? We are developing and firing and wiring those neurons and creating those neural pathways that says, which is the state of being scattered and scrolling is how I work. So that's the familiar. So when we do need to focus our attention, it becomes harder and harder. And the more we get interrupted, when all this interruption becomes familiar to the brain, then it becomes normal. So the brain goes, okay, this is normal. Being interrupted and doing gazillion things is the normal thing to do. But when you train your brain to complete a task, when you train your brain to focus, then you're training your brain, training that closing the loop, that completion to become familiar. And that's where clarity will follow. Mental fitness today grows from finishing, not from avoiding and multitasking. So I'm going to share with you a simple practice that you can work with. Notice the moment right before your hand reaches for your phone. I think it's so automatic. If you can just stop and notice that moment, just right before you see yourself reaching for your phone, and then you stop and you're like, okay, I'm going to pause right there. Okay. I want you to ask yourself, what feels unfinished right now? Before I reach out to my phone, what was I doing? And what can I complete right now? It might be just simply something you're thinking about, maybe a thought. It might be an emotion. It might be a decision that you're just about to make. You don't need to find the answer right away. You don't need an answer. I just want you to be aware. Just awareness alone, then does the job. So over time, your brain learns that completion feels safe. That when you interrupt the distraction, when you interrupt the scrolling, when you interrupt the back and forth, then you're training your brain to go, oh, I see where my energy is unfocused right now. I see where my energy is leaking right now. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to regroup and say, okay, what can I do right now to complete the task I'm doing, whether it's a thought, a decision, or a task, period, the physical task that you're doing, or a feeling or an emotion. So over time, again, your brain will learn that completing whatever you're doing feels safe. And then focus returns just easier. You can focus easier because your brain knows that when I complete something, I gain focus, I gain clarity. And so your brain now is used to it. So your brain wants to take you there because that's the new pattern that you're developing. So now, again, your focus returns easily, because you're interrupting those scattered loops, right? So you're bringing it back to focus, and decisions feel much better, much easier to make. They feel more cleaner as well. And you can manage pressure much easier that way because, again, you're in your prefrontal cortex, you're in your brain CEO, and you are not constantly, that subtle pressure that you're living with on the day-to-day because you're doing gazillion tasks, that goes away. So you're able to manage pressure much better because every time you're bringing yourself back into focus. Let's close a loop. Here's another loop closed. Here's another loop closed. You see how that works? And again, this focus and this clarity gets better because attention knows where to land. We're not just literally, we're no longer scattered. I need you to remember this. Your brain responds to the environment it lives in. So if you're feeding it chaos, if you're feeding it scattered, if you're feeding it unclosed loops, if you're feeding it unfocused, subtle pressure, constant pressure, then that's what it basically it's going to respond to. And that's what it's going to wire. Basically, when you protect your attention and you tell your brain, you need to be attentive, you need to focus, you need to complete what you're doing, you need to finish that thought, you need to finish that emotion, then you are strengthening the performance. You're going to perform way better. You're not going to feel drained at the end of the day. You're not going to feel scattered. You're not going to feel that as if you haven't really achieved much, even though you did a gazillion things. It's that simple. I really want to leave you with this. I would love for you to do this. Notice how often attention moves before something completes. I want you to maybe practice this one day or 1 hour or 30 minutes. Take 30 minutes in your day and say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to notice how many times my attention switched before it completes something. You'll be surprised that when you measure it and when you bring your awareness to it, it changes a lot. Again, just being aware of it is already huge because that's how you can interrupt it. And I want you to go further. So when you do notice how often your attention is moving and going back and forth, notice how your body feels when one thing finishes fully. So once you interrupt that loop and once you complete something, I want you to take note of, how do I feel? How does it feel in my body when I know I've completed this thing? And I focused and I completed one thing, as opposed to started something, went to another thing and another thing and another thing before I moved again, and so on and so forth, before I could completely finish this task. So notice how your body feels when you do one thing and you complete it and you finish it fully. When you practice that awareness consistently, it really can reshape how pressure feels and how you can regulate your nervous system and snap back into clarity, calm, authority, focus, anchor. And basically you are training your system to reset. So you're affecting everything. You're affecting how you age. You're affecting your mental health. You're affecting your mental fitness. You're affecting how well your brain is working against you. You're affecting how you're reacting. You are being more aware, and when you are in fight or flight, and you are able to reset it back into calm authority. It really just boosts your performance tremendously. Now, I'm going to wrap up here. I would love to have your comments about this episode and how well it served you and what insights you took. Maybe one insight you can share with me that really helped you, that you're taking away today. And please do reach out. And if you find this episode really resonated, please do share this episode, like, follow, and subscribe to my channel, as well as to this podcast. And you can scan this code if you're watching a video. Otherwise, check the description for my Linktree link, where I share a lot of tools that are very helpful for teams and leaders, and that are really want to practice pressure-proof performance. As always, lead with courage, lead boldly, stay bold, stay human. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, and turn every challenge, every difficulty into a gift. There's always a gift. Trust me, you can always find it. And if you find it right away, that's going to help you snap out of stress and regulate your nervous system. You could do